Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Bikes or Death podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I'm your host. And on today's episode, it is my pleasure to welcome Dan Connell to the podcast, also known as Dirty Dan. You will oftentimes see him lining up to races under that pseudonym, and he has been a busy boy. In 2024 alone, it feels like every time I turn on social media, he is on a different trip, a different adventure, or a different race. And I have grown really fond of just following him on social media. He's always going on epic adventures. He seems to always have a smile on his face. And he has an infectious love for fruit, all of which we will be discussing on today's podcast. He is also lining up in a couple weeks for the Tour Divide, and this will be his 5th consecutive year to take on that route. He first rode the Tour Divide in 2020. Technically, he did the Great Divide mountain bike route, and he toured it in 2020, not even aware that there was a race that took place. And so in 2021, he lined up to race the Tour Divide, and he's been back every single year since. And every single year, he shaves an entire day off of his time. So on today's episode, we're also going to be talking about his experiences on the Tour Divide up till now and how he's feeling, what he's looking forward to, and what his goals are going into Tour Divide for the 5th consecutive year. I absolutely loved having him on the podcast. He is a pleasure to chat with, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. So let's get into it. But first, let's take a moment to thank the people that made today's episode possible, starting with our latest batch of patrons, of which there are none this week. So if you would like to support this podcast and support the work that we do over here, a great way to do that is by signing up to be a sustaining member of the Bikes or Death podcast over at patreon.com/Bikes or Death. It is thanks to the community that the Bikes or Death podcast has been around for 5 years. Y'all absolutely keep the chains lubed, the tires inflated, and the stoke high. So we appreciate every single one of you that can support our efforts over here. And if you would like to contribute, now's a great time. And on next week's episode, maybe I'll be calling out your name. All right. Well, I also want to plug the Central Texas Showdown. If you're not aware, Bikes or Death puts on the Texas Showdown series, which starts in East Texas with the East Texas Showdown. Then we move to the Central Texas Showdown, and forthcoming will be the West Texas Showdown. The dates on that are still TBD, but we are working hard to plan and produce that event as soon as possible. There is a ton of interest in the West Texas Showdown already, which isn't surprising, but is also very exciting. And one of the interesting things about the West Texas Showdown is you are going to have to qualify for it. It's not just going to be an open registration, and there's going to be a few different qualifiers to be able to enter that event. One of the ways that you can qualify for the West Texas Showdown is by completing either the East Texas or Central Texas Showdown. So that is our longest route. So if you're interested in making sure that you can register when West Texas Showdown comes around, the Central Texas Showdown is a great starting point for that. The whole concept about the Texas Showdown series is to highlight the different regions of Texas, and Central Texas Showdown is in the iconic Texas Hill Country, and as the name suggests, it is hilly and absolutely beautiful, and I promise you will love it. We have 150 spots available this year, and we have 122 folks registered. So we still have 28 spots left. And if you would like to join us this October 24th through the 27th, we would love to have you. Come join us and find out what Texas is all about. There's a registration link in the bio, and of course, there's a lot of other information available there. This year we have 4 routes. So the first time ever, we have introduced a brand new route. The newest route is the Super Lowdown, which is only 83 miles. And we're really trying to cast a wide net and make the barrier to entry easy and give you an opportunity to participate in this event. The Super Lowdown is not a race. It's just a group ride. We have some designated camping areas. The whole idea there is to get out on your bike, enjoy the scenery, and be in great company. Following that, we have the Lowdown, which is 167 miles, and it's the same format as the Super Lowdown. It's just longer, so we have 2 designated camping areas that are already reserved and included in your registration. From there, you can bump up to the Slowdown, which is 296 miles, and the granddaddy is the Showdown, which is 473 miles. And the Slowdown and Showdown are both races. We do track your time, and we award prizes for first, second, and third. On the Slowdown, though, we do have some other fun awards like Best Dressed, Best Photography, and maybe some other ones that we come up with between now and then. And no matter which event you participate in, we try to celebrate everybody that comes out to our events. And we do so with the Hoedown. And the Hoedown takes place on Sunday evening. After all the races conclude, we're going to have raffle prizes and awards and just a all-around great time. That is when we celebrate you and give you an opportunity to commiserate and share stories with your fellow cyclists. So again, if you want to join us, we have a few spots left and we'd love to see you there. Registration link is in the bio. And I think that's it. So without further ado, let's get to my chat with Dan Connell, a.k.a. Dirty Dan. But first, let's have my friend Miles Arbor kick it off with the Bikes for Death theme song.
You load up your bike, you ride away from home. You could be with your friends or you could be alone. You ride for a day or maybe more. You just love being in the great outdoors. Everything you need is strapped to your bars, including that new pillow you got from Santa Claus. And then you think, oh shit, to yourself. You left that super lightweight tent on the living room shelf. Bikes for death. Bikes for death. Podcast.
Hey.
Ooh.
Can you hear me?
I like the sound of your voice.
Nice. Perfect.
I mean, your face is nice, but whenever it's complimented with your voice, it's even better.
Oh, man. So sweet. Thank you.
Absolutely. How you doing, man?
Wow. Oh, good, man. Super good. Yeah. Really, really stoked for this.
Yeah, me too. I'm a little, it's taken me a while to get my shit together to actually make this happen, but I'm glad that we did.
Yeah, man. Cool. Yeah. When we started, when you reached out or whatever a couple months ago, I was like, oh, man, no way. And just, I'm stoked that it's happening.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I'm a fan.
Oh, thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. I'm a fan too. Yeah.
Oh,
I've been
cool.
following you for a while and I'm excited to have you on the show for sure. Cheers.
Sweet. Cheers, man. What you drinking right now?
Cafe.
Oh, nice. I'm drinking tea out of my wifey mug.
Mine's boring and plain.
I also have the backup in case we get really thirsty out here.
Oh my gosh. Are you trying to put some weight on before the Tour Divide or what?
I'm not really trying to put weight on, but I drink a lot of milk. It works well for me, so.
That's so weird. I don't know how many people just drink milk, like just straight up milk. Like I cannot remember the last time I just had like a glass of milk. I'll drink it with like a peanut butter sandwich or with cereal or something, but not just like, I'm just going to drink a glass of milk.
Dude, it's so funny. It's what I'm always craving.
Interesting.
It is kind of weird. It is kind of weird. I know it's weird, but like, honestly, I'm going through like a half gallon most days, which is.
What are you drinking? Almond milk?
No, just a whole milk.
Just whole
cow's milk.
What do you have any idea what you think is in milk that your body is craving so much? Or is it just like you like the taste?
Well, I think that it's high calorie, and I think I'm just hungry a lot these days because I'm riding a lot.
Yeah.
It's high calorie, it's high protein, and it's got sugar. So it's kind of like the three things that I'm constantly looking for.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
And
sense. That's
and since it's a liquid, it's easy for my body to digest it. So that's why like during my rides, I'm always seeking out milk because it's a lot easier for my body to process that than like I don't know, like a bunch of food, or something.
Do you
So
make a distinction between chocolate and white milk?
yeah, I do. I used to be all about chocolate milk, um, but there's so much sugar in it, and regular milk already has a ton of sugar. So I've kind of transitioned away from the chocolate milk, and I just go for the OG milk, the
Oh,
white stuff.
wow. Oh, that would be an interesting study. I'm curious because I'm kind of backpedaling on my words because I have drank a considerable amount of chocolate milk on bike rides specific. It's the only time that I ever go into a
Hmm.
gas station. I'm like, oh, I just want to slam a chocolate milk. And I think chocolate milk is kind of a staple for a lot of cyclists and endurance cyclists. I think it's like a go-to, right? But
Totally.
I wonder how many people are drinking like white whole milk because
Regular
I
milk.
bet you're in the minority if I had to just guess.
I think so.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
funny.
so.
That's
Yeah.
funny. Well, good to know. All right. Well, Dirty Dan, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you so much. So stoked to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited to talk to you. It's been a long time coming. We've been chatting about doing this for a while, and it took me a while to get my shit together and actually make the connection and make this happen. But yeah, I've been following you for a long time. I really just enjoy following you on social media, man. You always have like a smile on your face, and you're always going on like amazing and epic adventures. And it feels like every single time I turn on social media, you're on another bike trip. Like it just blows my mind. Like, so a lot to talk about today, man. I'm excited.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's been
So,
a lot of adventure recently for sure.
yeah, you have been a busy boy. I'm curious though, real quick. Do you go by Daniel or Dan?
Nowadays it's mostly Dan, although all forms of Daniel work for me.
Great. Including Dirty Dan, I assume.
Dirty Dan, Dan, Danny, whatever. They all work.
And how do you pronounce your middle name? Where does that come from?
So it's Bijan,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the mustard, Bijan, but with a B. And it's Iranian. So my mom's from Iran and blessed me with a wonderful Iranian middle name.
Beautiful. And
Yeah,
did you grow up in the States? I think you're out in California.
exactly. Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles. I live in Santa Barbara now, but yeah, I spent my entire childhood growing up in LA.
Yeah, sick. Well, like I said, man, you've been busy. I mean, you sent me your kind of your resume, your cycling resume, and you got kicked off about 7 years ago. And I mean, it's just like a really dense list in a good way of like you've just been everywhere, you've done it all. And I think instead of listing out everything that you've done, I want to just focus on 2024 because like I mean, we're at the end of May now, but you have done a lot in 2024. So just 2024 alone, you did Baja Divide, then you did, and help me pronounce this, Transcordilleras.
Close. It's Transcordilleras.
I wasn't that close, but thanks for being nice to me.
Yeah,
Say it one more time.
Transcordilleras. So it's like the two L's.
Transcordilleras.
The two L's become like a Y sound.
I know they do. I'm trying to learn Spanish, and I have a mental block whenever it comes to like learning another language. And
Oh
my
yeah.
girlfriend's gonna give me shit for messing that one up again. But Transcordilleras race. So you did that, and
Yeah.
then you bike. That's in Colombia. You also did a lot of bike touring while in Colombia. Then you
Hmm.
did a double Everest. Then you did Stagecoach 400, Tour de Los Padres, race across Arizona, and you're about to head out on the Tour Divide in 8 days. So, I mean, you've been busy, man. It's freaking insane.
Yeah, I guess when you put it like that, it sounds like I've been riding quite a bit.
That's what I'm saying.
My
Like, it's
mind,
like, go ahead.
yeah. This morning I was like, man, I think I need to like do a little bit more riding right now because the Tour Divide is coming up so soon. But yeah, I guess I've been riding a lot. So
Yeah, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. We're gonna find
yeah.
out. But like I said, it feels like every single time I turn on social media, especially this year, well, ever since like Tour Divide last year, it just seems like it's just been one thing after another. And so I'm always interested to know like what you do for a living, what people do for a living that allows for this type of lifestyle and this much travel, because obviously most people aren't able to get away this much. So what are you doing that allows for you to be able to do this?
Absolutely. Yeah. So starting in 2017, which is when I kind of started this lifestyle of doing longer bike trips and just pretty much getting into a lot of these kinds of adventures, I started a lifestyle that was pretty focused on seasonal jobs, seasonal work. The way that looks for me right now is from July 1st, so pretty much the day I get back, hopefully, from the Tour Divide, until December, I work on scuba dive boats here in Santa Barbara. So we have two live aboard boats, and we take people on all sorts of adventures out at the Channel Islands National Park. It's an amazing job, and I'm super grateful for it. And it's 7 days a week, pretty full on. Like we're living on the boats, constantly running trips for about 6 months, and that is, I would say, the bulk of what allows me to live this lifestyle. Where I then work those 6 months and then take about a month or two off and go travel on my bike, and then I come back and I also work at a bike shop here in town, which is my job currently. So I'm kind of constantly swapping from seasonal adventure focused jobs, then going on my own adventures, and then coming back to the bike shop. And that's kind of been the cycle for maybe 3 years now with this exact setup, um,
Fun.
which definitely works for me. It's not a glamorous lifestyle, and I know that sometimes with social media, it's kind of like, oh, obviously I'm showcasing the stuff that's, you know, traveling and this and that, but there's other parts to that kind of lifestyle, instability and you know, I've the amount of times where I've had to like pack up all my belongings and find a new home and find a new community and all that kind of stuff, that's all part of it as well. But if you can get by with all those things, then yeah, the lifestyle is can be pretty can cater to adventure pretty well. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. I think that, man, I'm really glad you kind of shed a little bit of light on that, because you're right. I think that we can be lulled into thinking that Dan or anybody that's out there adventuring and traveling by bike is just living this like, I don't know, lavish and exciting lifestyle. And we often overlook what it takes like on a day-to-day basis, what kind of sacrifices that you're making to be able to do what you're doing. And I'm curious, like we just had Alyssa Bell on the podcast. She was my last episode, and she had like she was like very established in her career and married, and then she got the bug to start traveling, so she actually quit her job and started solo traveling all over the world. And with the idea that maybe she'll go back to corporate America, but the whole idea being like, maximize the time that you have kind of when you're young and adventure while you can, and then later in life maybe settle more into a career. So for you personally, like, is this a lifestyle that you hope to maintain for a long period of time? Do you see yourself going into quote unquote corporate America, or what does that trajectory look like for you?
Totally, yeah. I don't see myself going into corporate America. I kind of tried that lifestyle very briefly. I got my degree in math and statistics in college, and
Oh
so
shit.
I did have a brief period where I was with a wealth management firm. A lot of people don't know that about me.
That's cool.
And I tried that out. That was in New York City, and it was miserable for me. I was like dressing in a suit every day and, going into the office and looking at a computer screen a ton. And it was pretty clear to me right away that that was not a lifestyle that I that worked for me, so I don't think I can go back into a job quite like that in, corporate America. But yeah, I mean, my goal is, as of right now, to make this lifestyle that I'm living sustainable. I think that right now it's just about working out for me, but I am hoping to figure out a way to make it more, yeah, more stable and more sustainable, because I truly love it, and I think that this lifestyle that I'm living right now is one that really makes me appreciate life, and it makes me feel really alive and challenged, and I feel like I'm growing in a lot of ways and stuff like that. So I want to continue doing that. Um, Whether or not it's going to be with this seasonal situation, that I'm not sure about.
Yeah.
But one way or another, I'd love to live a lifestyle where I'm still riding my bike, going on these kinds of adventures, but making it more sustainable somehow.
I mean, we're seeing a huge emergence in, what you're doing, what anyone listening to this podcast is doing or interested in, which is bike packing and bike pack racing. And I mean, this sector of cycling, I think from like 2018, 2017 is just like exponentially exploded. Do you see an opportunity to potentially like carve out a lifestyle and a career out of riding your bike, or is that adjacent and kind of secondary to that?
Yeah, I see it as a possibility, and I'll put it out there. I mean, it's a big dream of mine to make it a reality. I think that there's a couple different ways that people can do it. You get some legends like Sofian and those kinds of people that are, so, they're winning the Tour Divide, they're winning all these races. And I think that that is one avenue into that lifestyle, where if you're like really at the top of the game and you're, yeah, taking first place at all these big races, then that's one way to do it. But there's a lot of other people who have it as more of a lifestyle, and maybe they're working with certain brands and helping them develop products and getting the word out there. I think that my avenue is going to be a combination of a few things, because I love to do the racing, and I try to do as well as I can. I'm not winning these top races, but I'm pushing myself pretty hard. But I also love the adventure aspect of it, and going on just tours for the sake of touring, the Baja Divide and in Colombia and stuff like that. I also love helping other people go bike packing. That's something I've really fallen in love with the last couple of years. Even today I have a phone call with someone who's a friend of a friend who's going to South America with a bike, and I got connected with them, and I have these kinds of calls with people pretty regularly. I'd say at least once a week, where I'm just helping people get out there, whether it's through gear or route recommendations or just giving people peace of mind that everything's going to be okay, things like that. So I'm thinking that I might have a path where I can combine all of those things, and maybe do some sort of consulting, while also maybe working with companies to help them with products, maybe doing gear review, maybe doing well in races,
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it is going to have to be a creative route. I don't think that there's any like simple, easy way to make a adventure lifestyle, all of a sudden become a career. I think you have to get creative with it. And yeah, you're totally right. I mean, more and more people are doing it, and it's really cool and super inspiring to see as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I don't think that the cycling industry has fully caught up to exactly what's going on in bike packing, bike pack racing. And from their perspective, like, they're also trying to get creative and figure out like, okay, how do we work with people who are doing this? And it seems like everybody's still trying to figure it out, but it speaks to kind of how new it is. But also, I think it's really exciting. I think there's a lot of people that see a path forward and, making some type of career out of riding their bike and living a more adventurous lifestyle. So yeah, really cool stuff. Just a fun question while we're getting to know you. How many bikes do you own, and what is your favorite bike right now? Which one do you ride the most?
Oh my gosh. Okay. How many bikes do I own? One, two, three, four. I own four bikes. One of them is in retirement. It's my original touring bike that I got for $100 and some change, and I ended up riding that bike, you know, down to South America from my home here, and across Africa and across the like. It was awesome, but that bike is tired. So it's more of an
And what is
antique
it?
at this point. A Trek 880 or something. It's a Trek mountain bike from the 80s, from the late
Awesome.
80s.
Yeah.
Just yeah, old mountain bike that I converted to a touring bike, and I love that bike. Actually, I have a tattoo of that bike on my arm because it's like
Oh,
all it's always with me.
yeah. I saw
Um,
that tattoo. That's dope. Yeah.
thanks, man.
Anyone who wants to take a look at it, it's on his Instagram. That's a good tattoo.
Thanks, man.
I have a mine's a board.
Oh,
I have a
sperm
whale. Actually,
whale.
I love that tattoo. And then I got a
Dude, no
shark. I
way.
got a shark on that side.
No way. Oh man, dude, we got to get you out to the Channel Islands sometime.
Yeah, just those are ironically enough, those are both cover up tattoos. And so
Oh,
like
really?
I just needed something like big and massive to like cover up those space. And I mean I love all animals and most of my tattoos have something to do with nature or the outdoors or something like that. But the idea of scuba diving is kind of scary to me.
Oh yeah, it is like that for a lot of people. I mean, it's a totally unnatural feeling to just be underneath the surface of the water for, an hour at a time. But once you get past that, that mental block, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it's so wonderful. It's such a good
Yeah.
world down there.
Well, I would do
Um,
it with a good teacher like you. I'm in.
oh, I would love to go scuba diving with you.
Thanks,
That'd be
buddy.
so fun. Um, but yeah, so I have that touring bike. I have a beautiful old Italian road bike as well. It's a Viner. I haven't really seen many of them. Then I've got my fat bike that I took down to Baja,
Hmm.
Surly Pugsley. Love that bike. And I've got my Rodeo Labs Flanimal, which is definitely the bike that I've ridden more than any other bike at this point. I mean, I've been riding that bike for a few years now on pretty much all of these adventures aside from the Baja one. But as of a week and a half ago, I just got a new bike. Yeah, a bike that I'm going to be taking on the Tour Divide this year. So I'm super
Oh
pumped
wow.
on it. It's a Trek Super Caliber.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's a
which
mountain bike, right?
it's a big change. Yeah, it's a full suspension mountain bike. And so I've never owned a bike with any kind of suspension, front or rear. And I've been doing all of these routes the last few years that are pretty much mountain biking routes. A lot of them are. And so I've been just wondering what that's like to have a little bit of squish, something to maybe make things a little bit more comfortable, and maybe inspire some confidence on my descending and stuff like that. And so, yeah, got set up. I'm super stoked and really grateful, and got set up to ride a new bike for the Tour Divide this year. So
Oh
that's
wow.
kind of a new one in the works. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about it, man. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a big change where you just finding that I mean, and obviously no shade to the Flanimal. Everybody says nothing but good things about the Flanimal. It seems to be like
Dude,
just an amazing bike, but like,
best bike ever, honestly.
yeah,
The,
for
the
sure.
Flanimal, it's just incredible. Yeah.
So why make the change? Were you just under biking and ready to have a bike that was more appropriate for the kind of terrain? Like, what was that? What was that
Yeah,
behind that
I think
decision?
it started because this year with a lot of the routes I've been doing, they have been things like Stagecoach and the Tour de los Padres and also the riding in Colombia. All of those routes are pretty chunky, and I maybe felt a bit underbiked in some of them. And so I've just been kind of curious what the lifestyle of a squishy bike is like. And then also, I look up to a few people in the bikepacking world. One of them is Jay Peter Very, who I know as you've had a few awesome chats with him. And something that I really appreciate about him is he's constantly trying new things. I always see every time he's going, he's done the Tour Divide or the Great Divide or, all the different ways that he's done it. He's done them so many times, and he always has different gear. He's trying new bikes, new systems, and it seems like he's constantly learning what works for him, and he's also kind of just exploring what sorts of bikes and gear work in this bikepacking world. 'Cause I'm pretty sure he was riding, the classic adventure gravel bikes, like Fargo type bikes and Flanimals way before they became as popular as they are now. So kind of drawing from that inspiration too, I was like, you know what? I've now done this. I've done the Tour Divide the last 4 years in a row, always on rigid bikes. I've done it on a Salsa Fargo twice, and the Rodeo Labs Flanimal twice. And it's worked out for me for sure, but it would be fun to see if having suspension changes the experience one way or another, whether maybe it's going to be slower but more comfortable and my body feels better at the end of it, or maybe it's going to be faster. Who knows?
Yeah.
My hope is that it's faster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It would be weird if you got that bike and you're like, man, I hope I go slower this time.
No, definitely hoping to go faster. But also, I'm also very much aware that the bike is just one component of how something like the Tour Divide goes. A lot of it is the rider, your mental strength and stuff like that, and a bit of luck too, and how weather is. I mean, there's so many factors, and I think that's why I like the Tour Divide so much, and why it brings me back year after year, is because there's just there's no monotony. Like it's so exciting, and there's so many variables that come into play every year that it feels like a new experience every time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the other thing, touching on your bikes, it sounds like now you've essentially filled in the gap. So you have a road bike, you have a fat bike, you have a gravel bike that it's more of an adventure, different tire sizes, different terrains, and then you add in the full suspension. And so it sounds like now you've just filled into where you have a full quiver of bikes and could take on just about anything.
Totally. Yes, I have a full quiver. How exciting is that?
Yeah. Watch out, world. Watch out, bike world. He's coming.
I'm so grateful, man.
Yeah, that's sick, dude. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to 2017. You said that was your first bike trip, your first big bike tour. And that was California down to Colombia. But I want to get an insight into how that speaks to you as a person. How old were you when you went on that trip in 2017? And how did you even learn about bikepacking and bike touring? Where were you at in your life where you heard about that and you were like, oh, I want to go do that, versus the other 99.9% of the population? Whenever you and I both talk to people, we ride bikes a long ways, and you talk to people and their eyes just glaze over, and
right.
They're like, oh, I can't even ride out my driveway, or I would die or whatever. So give us an insight into what it is about Dan, or who you were, where you're at in your life, where at that age you were like, yes, that's for me.
Totally. Yeah. It was a pretty fun introduction into the whole world of bike travel and stuff like that. So in 2017, when I went on that first ride down to Colombia, I was 21 years old. I just graduated college. And right when I was about to graduate college, I had already had that experience in New York that I did not enjoy. And I knew that I needed to go out and do something that felt meaningful to me, and traveling with a purpose is what I was looking for. And it wasn't necessarily going to be with bicycles, but I knew I wanted to go traveling, and I wanted to have a purpose, which for me meant fundraising or doing something that would impact the world in a way that was more so than just me going on a vacation, essentially. And right after I graduated, there was a music festival in Oregon that I was looking to volunteer with so that I could get a free entry. And I found this really interesting opportunity of people that were riding their bicycles from San Francisco out to the festival in Oregon as part of a eco-friendly thing. It was kind of weird. But anyways, I joined up with this group and we went riding. It took us about 2 weeks to get from San Francisco to this music festival in Oregon. And during that ride, which was supported, I was just riding a road bike and there was a van that was carrying all our gear and stuff like that. There were a couple people on that ride who were seasoned bike travelers, and I had no idea about that world. And there was this one guy named Dr. Bueno who was just his stories every night at the fire. I was just like jaw to the floor. We'd all be kind of talking about our lives and this and that. And then he would just have some outrageous story about how he was being chased by wolves in Russia and this, like just crazy stuff. And I was like, man, like I want stories like that. Like this guy has been on some real adventures. And he pretty much was the main route of, he was the one who was like, dude, you just need to get on a bicycle and start riding. He's like, clearly you can ride a bike. And so it was just a couple weeks after that. I mean, within 1 week of after that festival, I got that bike. That bike's name is Santana. I got Santana on the central coast of California, yeah, for $100 or a little bit more. Just loaded up with panniers, loaded up with a guitar, the bike tools that I thought I would need, which I didn't really know anything. I didn't even know how to change a flat tire, to be honest. I had the tools for it, but I didn't know how to do that. And I just loaded that thing up. I mean, it was proper heavy. I brought everything, full cast iron cookware and all that stuff. And yeah, I just kind of took off on that journey. Gosh, I feel like I got a little I lost my train of thought there. But yeah,
I
that's
think
kind of
you're
how I got
doing
into
I
it.
think you're doing great, Dan.
Oh, thanks, Patrick. Yeah, that's how I got into it. Was really, I went on that bike ride with a bunch of funky people going to Oregon, and then got inspired by one or two of them, and was like, shoot, well, I guess this is how I should be traveling and how I want to see the world. And also, it made sense to me because bike travel can be, even though it doesn't always seem like it, bike travel totally can be a low budget form of traveling. You don't need the fancy stuff, and that's something I always try and tell people when I'm trying to help other people get into bike packing. Is like, don't worry about getting the top of the line touring bike, brand new off the shelf. Like, go find any bicycle. Like, you can make any bike work, really.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And my buddy who I did that trip with, same thing. Neither of us were cyclists. Neither of us knew how to fix anything on bikes. We didn't really speak Spanish. We didn't really have any of those things that you would think you would need to know how to do. And we just started riding, and it was so pure. I look back on that first trip down to South America, and it just like, it warms my heart because we were just like, we had no idea what we were getting into. We were like, oh yeah, we're going on a bike ride to Colombia. But like, I didn't study anything. I didn't research anything at all. I didn't know about bikepacking.com or like any of that kind of stuff. It was just
Wow.
like bicycles, load them up with clothes and things to have fun and start riding. And man, that was just the trip of a lifetime. And it was just as that trip went on, once I was 2 or 3 months into that trip, I just knew. I'm getting goosebumps right now, just like tapping back into that moment, because I was just in love at that point. I was like, I just really felt like I was doing what I needed to be doing, and I was where I needed to be. I loved using the bicycle as a form of travel. It was connecting me to people and experiences that I don't think I would have ever found elsewhere.
Yeah.
Um, and so I
How
knew during that trip, I was like, okay, I need to figure out a way how to keep doing this. It's like, this trip eventually is going to have to end because I'm going to run out of money, and I need to figure out a way to make some money and get right back to where I am right now.
how well traveled were you prior to that trip? Not necessarily on a bike, obviously, because this was your introduction. But yeah, like how well traveled were you, and had you been to Latin America before?
Yeah, so I did a study abroad program in my university. I did that in Brazil. So I had lived in Brazil for about half a year, a couple years prior to taking off on that journey. And I think that trip also was really important to me because it opened my eyes to the world of adventure travel. It wasn't with a bicycle. But I was doing all sorts of backpacking trips and meeting people and learning the language and stuff like that. And I think that trip was really important to an important stepping stone to what became this like bike adventure lifestyle. But also growing up as a kid, I definitely was fortunate to travel a bit. Both my parents are foreigners. Like my mom is from Iran and my dad's from Ireland. Unfortunately, I haven't been to Iran yet, although it's extremely high on my list. It's like my major dream is to go to Iran with my bicycle.
Yeah.
But I was lucky enough to go to Ireland a couple of times for things like funerals and weddings and, you know, just family stuff. So definitely was lucky to do some traveling growing up. But I would say like my real adventure travel began with my study abroad program in Brazil. And then from there, for sure, that first bike trip going down through Mexico, it was like, it was pretty full on. And a huge goal of that trip as well was to learn Spanish. So I actually had a notebook that I had strapped to my front, like on my front rack pretty much. And I was just constantly, every word that I didn't know, I would write it down. And we were constantly talking to people and had our dictionaries out. And it felt like we were really studying the language during that trip, which ended up being great because now I totally speak Spanish, and it's allowed for me to go on a lot more of these Latin American journeys, and, you know, connect with people and stuff like that.
Yeah. Super interesting. That's actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about is like, one, I was curious if you spoke Spanish, and then also like, how important do you think it is to speak the language? I mean, we'll talk about Spanish right now because that's where we're talking about, but in general, like, you know, how important is it to be able to speak the language? I mean, there can be, you know, safety concerns there, just being able to order food, get directions. Mm-hmm. Like, how important is that component of international travel?
I don't think that speaking the language of whatever country you're in is something that is mandatory for bicycle travel, but it definitely will shape the experience differently. Because I've now experienced both of them, right? Where, well, traveling in the US, obviously, but also, you know, traveling in Spanish speaking countries, I now feel pretty much fluent with my Spanish. And it allows for connections to be, to feel more real. And, you know, like you're actually making jokes with people, and it feels like you're building a real friendship where you're sharing about your life stories and things like that. But when I did a ride from Egypt to South Africa in 2018, all of those countries that we went through pretty much until we got to Namibia and South Africa, where they speak English, all of those countries were speaking different languages that I didn't understand. So I definitely experienced that language barrier as well. And it's just a different experience, you know, like I found that you can really communicate well with your eyes and with a smile, you know, so it's a lot of that sort of thing where if you're really hungry, even if you can't tell someone, you know, oh, I'm looking for food, you can show them with your eyes and you know, hand gestures and things like that. So yeah, I don't think it's necessarily important that you speak the language going into a country. I do think it's very respectful to try and learn as much of it as you can. That's really important. You definitely want to learn. The first word you should learn is thank you. And then you should also learn how to say thank you very much. You know, like those are the things that I would always learn. And before we would go into a country that spoke a different language, we would listen to podcasts that would, you know, help us learn the basics, numbers, how to say, you know, water and sleep, things like that. I think that's really important, you know, to show respect and for whatever place you're going to try and speak the language.
Yeah, not come in as the the arrogant American that's like expecting you to communicate in my language. That's like brings with it
that is the worst.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you definitely don't want to be
try.
the dude.
Like I can't speak Spanish very well, but I want to try to speak Spanish, and then you know, oftentimes they'll start speaking English and kind of give you a pass, you know, but it is a form of respect. And also, like, I want to learn how to speak Spanish. Like I'm very curious about the people, the culture, and I want to go podcast in Spanish, you know. I want to go like live down there and just like get all their stories, you know. And
Oh
And
my
so I think
God, yeah.
just being able to speak the language like unlocks another level. But to your point, it's not necessarily a requirement. But I do really like what you said about showing respect to them and their culture and their language by at least trying to,
Hmm.
communicate with them in their own and in their dialect.
Certainly, yeah. And also, I mean, when you go to a country like, you're in Ethiopia, right? They're speaking Amharic, and if you're a traveler and you're over there in the countryside and you just attempt to speak their language, it makes people pretty happy, because it's not a very commonly spoken language. So I think it's just also a kind of a cool way to, yeah, show your respect, and make friends,
Yeah,
that way
it
as
kind of
well, by
endears
just,
you to them a little.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. One of the questions I have about that first trip is the Darien Gap. For people who don't know, the Darien Gap is between Panama and Colombia. So Colombia was the end of your journey, but you had to get past the Darien Gap, which is it's a dangerous, I don't know, 100-mile section of little peninsula between those two land masses.
Hmm.
Did you know about the Darien Gap going into that trip? And how did y'all go through it or around it? Like what happened with
Yeah.
that?
Oh, such a good story with that one. But to answer, did we know about it going into it? No, not at all. I mean, I, I really, I don't recommend this, but I really didn't research anything going into that trip. I just got my bike ready to the degree that I thought it needed to be, and pretty much started riding. One really cool part of that trip that's kind of related is on our first day riding south, we were along the coast. Yeah, so we were riding down south, and some guy yelled at us like, "Oh, hey, where you guys headed?" And I was like, "We're going to Colombia." And it was like, and then I thought to myself, I was like, "Whoa, are we really going to Colombia? Like, that's just kind of a random thing that we've decided." And then I was thinking more about it, and I was like, "Man, I think that means we're gonna have to cross the Panama Canal, right? Like, that's on the way to Colombia." And then 5 months later, we showed up at the Panama Canal and we're crossing it. And it was like this whole full circle moment, full body goosebumps, crying, screaming, like crossing the Panama Canal. And that was really an important like milestone of that journey. And getting to the Darien Gap, it was like, yeah, another one of those, it's like an iconic part of that journey, right? It's like, how do you cross the Darien Gap? We started hearing about it more and more once we got closer to it. Um, so we didn't want to take, a lot of people take a flight from Panama City to Cartagena, or you can take like a big sailboat sort of thing that goes from the coast of Panama to Cartagena. We did not want to do that option. It was a little bit more expensive, and we were thinking like, oh, let's just try and cross the Darien Gap. Like, why not? So we rode to the very end of the highway, which ends in this really small town called Yavisa, and that's where the Darien Gap starts. And we spent a couple days there, um, kind of exploring the area and seeing how feasible is it for us to cross this jungle with our bikes. Obviously, we can't ride there, so we'd have to hike. We started talking to some potential guides and stuff like that. Ended up being really hard logistically, and we would have had to had a whole bunch of people helping us carrying gear and stuff like that, and it wasn't the vibe. So we turned around and went back out to the coastline, and there's a really interesting area in between Panama and Colombia along the coast that's called the Cunayala Comarca. And the Cunayala is a territory, I hope I'm using the right term, but it's like a territory that is technically within Panama, but they also have their own culture, their own language, and kind of a little bit of independence from Panama as well. And we went to that area, the Cunayala, and over the course of a couple of weeks, we were just waiting for small fishing boats, pretty much, to take us from one village to the next. And
Oh,
it was really exciting, because, well, the language barrier, we had been speaking Spanish this whole time, and then all of a sudden now we're in a place where they don't even speak Spanish. So it was like back to that communicating with your eyes, and oh my God, the experiences there were just absolutely unreal. I mean, that was, I think, the most like removed from like society, I guess, or like modern Western civilization type stuff that I've ever been in. There it was just a really natural form of living. They were happy. They were living off the land, growing almost all of their food. And yeah, it was a really, really cool experience that took a couple of weeks. And then we ended up getting dropped off by a small boat at this small town right on the border of Panama and Colombia at the coast, called Capurganá, and that's like an actual town in Colombia. And we got our passport stamped there and stuff like that. And yeah, that was crossing the Darien Gap. Such a great adventure. My
Fucking
God.
insane. That's mental,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah.
All right, let me unpack this just a little bit to make sure I understand. So obviously y'all went in without a lot of, foresight or knowledge. You're just like, all right, we're just gonna ride down to Colombia. So when you got to the Darien Gap, and you were just like, you would take a boat, go to this village, and then you were just hoping that there was somebody else that would take you to the next one, and so on. Like, how confident are you when you started on that little journey that it was gonna work?
We knew it was going to work because the starting off point, we were talking to this guy. I wish his little village was called Kartis Sugdub, and he was certain of it because the fishing is just really, it's super popular there. I mean, it's what they're doing. So there's a lot of interaction from one village to the next, and yeah, we were going on these fishing boats, but they were also transporting like goods from one village to the next. So the boats operate out there, but they're really small boats, and us and our bikes were taking a total beating on those things because small boat in big ocean. I mean, we were just slamming. Our bikes were soaked in salt water, like all day. But we were certain that as long as we didn't have a time crunch, that it would work out because these boats are going from one village to the next.
Okay.
So we had that peace of mind. We knew we weren't going to all of a sudden be in the middle of all that and then kind of just be out of luck or whatever.
It's still so crazy because, I mean, you again, you don't speak the language, so you're going to get into a small town on a boat and then have to in some way communicate to the people that you're trying to hop on somebody's boat and go to the next one. I mean, like,
Yeah.
that's wild, man. That's like so
Oh,
fucking out there.
it was out there. That was the most adventurous part of that whole journey, without a doubt. Like,
Yeah.
no question. Yeah.
We could probably do a whole podcast just
The
on like that 2 week
the
section, like right
Cunayala.
there.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
And it's just so gorgeous over there too, just jungle. It's like where the jungle meets the tropical waters, and it was just so full of life and coconuts everywhere and just really kind people. I mean, and that's something that, that's just such a, that's all of these bike trips. That's the common ground, is that people are so kind, like no matter where you are in Latin America, Africa, Cunayala, it's like humans are kind. That's a huge takeaway that I've gotten from all this, and something that keeps me going back for more is like just seeing the beauty in the world, and yeah, how kind people are.
I really love that. But I'm also wanting to not to put a damper on what you just said, because what you just said is very beautiful and I love that. But I think one of the things that keeps people from traveling on, you're very exposed on a bike. You're very subject to weather and people and, anything that happens, right? So like,
Mm-hmm.
what has been your experience with fear and, and scary situations? I mean, has that been also a part of your experience, or have you been really fortunate
Mm-hmm.
with just having great human connection and interactions along the routes?
It's more so the latter. I think that the fear aspect mostly comes from other people trying to instill that in a way, whether it's like the media or, something that was a really interesting occurrence, especially in Mexico, was every town we would get to, they would always ask us where we were going. And then they would say, "Oh my gosh, don't go there. it's dangerous over there, but it's safe here. And then we would go to that next town and it would be the same thing. Oh, don't go to the next one. It's dangerous over there, but it's safe here. And that was honestly almost a daily thing where people were telling us that we were safe, but where we were headed was dangerous. And it was the same thing, we're in the US, we're heading down to Mexico. I don't even know how many of friends and family members were telling me, oh, it's impossible. You can't ride your bike across Mexico, and it's too dangerous, and you're gonna run into problems with the police and this and that. And I think that it's really easy to develop a fear of something you don't know about, or a place that you're not familiar with. You can make up all these stories in your head about what it's like and blah blah blah. But I found during that trip and pretty much all of my trips that these places are not what they're made out to be as far as the danger. And maybe, and I don't mean to be naive. Obviously there's dangerous places in the world, and things can happen. But I think that if you are traveling through a place with good intentions, I think a lot of it is your intentions. If you're there just to learn about the culture, you're not there to exploit anybody or anything. You just, and you put those kind of, for lack of better term, like positive vibes out as you're entering these new places. Like it kind of just comes right back to you. That's what I have experienced, at least. And things, like in Mexico, the police. I slept at, I don't even know how many police stations. We would find the police in every town we went to and talk to them and ask them where we can camp. And oftentimes they would say, oh, just camp right here. I even slept in a couple jail cells, like in Guatemala and stuff like that, because it was raining. Yeah, totally voluntarily. Okay. Yeah, it would be raining and they'd be like, oh man, just come sleep inside. And I'd be like, oh, I'm actually in a cell right now, huh? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. Like no one's here. It's like, okay, for sure. Fire stations, same thing. We slept at so many fire stations. I just think that, as long as you're going through a place with like the right intentions and positive vibes, and you're, looking to build friendships and learn their language, and that positivity just kind of comes right back at you. That's what I experienced, at least. So that fear, has never really, like I don't have much fear anymore going to these places. Sketchy situations. I mean, the sketchiest stuff for me has always just been like traffic related, like cars are by far the most dangerous part of any of these trips. And that's why I'm really grateful to have now tapped into this off-road touring lifestyle with more like what I guess would be called bike packing, where you're on roads that are less traveled and you're on the dirt. And so you're not riding on highways, which is what we were doing on that first trip. We were pretty much riding on highways the whole time. But yeah, I think that's it. Like traffic is the dangerous part, but people have been good.
Yeah. I've had very positive experiences in Latin America. I was involved in like a armed robbery type thing, or an attempt in El Salvador. But like it was like an old drunk guy. It was a really weird situation. The guy was like waving his gun, and waving his gun around, not pointing it at me, but clearly drunk. And like, it's a long story, but I engaged with him as a way to like put myself between me and my girlfriend so like she could get away. And I didn't know it was like a split second thing. And I went up to him and he said, give me your money. But I didn't really understand him. And listen to what I said, Dan. You're going to love this. So my Spanish isn't very good. And I was like nervous because it was like a real life situation. I said to him, no habla inglés. Which is hilarious. I actually have this on GoPro. I just happen to have my GoPro on, and so like I have the whole interaction on GoPro, and so I could like listen to it back. And I think like me saying no habla inglés like disarmed him. He was like, wait, what the fuck is going on? And anyway, the shop owner came over and just like kind of shooed him away. But it was a really interesting thing. Like he was a very old and very intoxicated under some kind of influence, and it was a very sloppy attempt that he was making. I don't know. It was very weird. But El Salvador has a really interesting past. They've been under like cartel control and a lot of gang violence, and there's a lot of like really serious things going on there. So I don't think we can like go into, other countries without any awareness and just kind of like a blind eye. But also like what you said about your neighbor is always going to warn you of your neighbor. I've heard that so many times. Like you go to one town and they're like going to warn you about the next town. And I think there is something to that where we're just afraid of what we don't know. But by and large, my experiences have been extremely good, and I haven't had any experiences that would deter me from like, specifically traveling to Latin America. If anything, like I'm turned up to 11. I'm ready. Like, let's go tomorrow.
Let's go. Let's go. Love
it.
Super cool.
So you said that first trip, along with your two first and longest, or your two first long international trips, were what did you write? Were the foundation of why you ride bikes, for the raw and pure adventure of what bikes can provide. Can you unpack that succinctly? Like what was it? What is it exactly that you took away and still informs, like you are still traveling by bike, like you're still doing this. So what spoke to you about those trips?
Right. I mean, what comes to mind for me is that, me and my buddy Quincy, who I did the first ride with, and then myself, Quincy, and Byron, we did the Africa ride with. When we all get together, we can just off of our memory recount every single day from those trips, where we woke up, what the riding was like that day, where we slept, what we had for dinner, where we woke up, and day by day. And we've gone through those trips just off memory. And these are like 6-month trips, and we're remembering every single day of them. And, if you asked me, what I did last month on a certain day, I probably wouldn't remember, and I think that that's kind of just telling of what those trips are like. It's the experiences you're getting on a day-to-day basis are just so impactful and special and exciting. And it's kind of addicting, right? I mean, it's a really positive feeling to feel challenged, and like you're learning, and you're, eating new things and meeting new people and all that kind of stuff. And I think that that's just kind of the nature of what these long bike rides are, is there's just these experiences that are just memorable, back to back to back. And it feels like you're just maximizing the potential of life, like we all have a finite amount of time living here, and making the most of every day is important. And I think that when you're on a bike tour, that's just the default, is you're making the most of the day, because it's so adventurous. And I think that's what I seek. That's that feeling I seek, is I'm looking for bike. Like I love bicycles, and especially now, like I've gotten a lot more into bikes themselves, and I'm like a little more nerdy about them and whatever. But ultimately what I seek is that feeling that the bicycle brings you, and the memories that the bicycle helps you make, that are they just feel like worthy of living. It's like I want to go and ride my bike and experience something that, I'll remember the way I felt and the way the food tasted 10 years later. I don't know if that makes sense.
I think it's great. I mean, it's sticky, and what the thing that like I think about is, and I'm curious to get your take on this, is like, I think there's something about immersing yourself in a completely different culture where you don't know the language, the food, the traffic patterns, how cell phones work, like everything. Your brain is just firing at a rapid pace. And I think like for me, I think there's like almost an addictive, like your dopamine is just firing like all the time.
Completely.
Do you make a distinction? Is there a distinction for you between like international bike travel and traveling in the United States?
Yeah, I think pretty much you nailed it. It's when you're international, everything is just so different. So you are a little bit more tuned into your surroundings, noticing, all the new things around you, new smells, new language, and all that kind of stuff. And also, I think that you're right that all those things alone kind of have your brain firing and your dopamine's going crazy. And then you add in the fact that you're riding a bicycle, which is just like a really healthy thing to be doing, which already riding a bicycle alone, will increase your dopamine and your kind of awareness. And you put the two together and it just creates like goosebumps. It's like, wow, like this is I'm so alive. That's the feeling that I get a lot, is just feeling like really present and aware of my existence, just because there's so much going on around me. And I think that as far as international versus traveling within the US, it's totally different. When I'm traveling internationally on a bike, I feel more like a student, where I'm really focusing on learning culture and learning language and those kinds of things. And when I'm traveling in the US, there's still a lot of learning, but it's a little different. It's almost like I focus more on, learning wilderness skills and how to interact with animals properly and
Right.
things of that nature, Because, man,
Yeah.
we are so lucky in the US. We have so many options for amazing bikepacking experiences here, too.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like the U.S. lends itself, I mean, aside from the fact that you already know the language and the food and everything, like we just have more outdoor space. So it lends itself to more outdoor experience, not nature experiences with a grizzly bear. I know you had some
Mm-hmm.
grizzly bear encounter and, whatever,
Yeah.
like you can lean into that more. Whereas like most of the places you travel, you're going to be interacting with cultures and people and communities more
Mm-hmm.
frequently. And so it makes sense that those two experiences are just kind of naturally lend itself in those
Mm-hmm.
different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all right, well, hour in. Let's skip ahead 7 years.
Whoa.
It goes
Yeah,
fast,
totally.
man.
Totally.
It
That's crazy.
goes so fast. So
Yeah.
7 years later, we're gonna start with the Baja Divide, which is how you
Oh,
kicked off 2024.
yeah.
And when we were preparing for this show, you said that the Baja Divide really tapped into the adventurous feel. So, like at this
Yeah.
stage in your bike traveling career, let's call it, what does that mean? What does an adventurous
Totally.
feel mean to you?
Yes. So okay, I did those two long trips that were like pure adventure. 20 miles a day, whatever, didn't matter. It was just about the adventure. It wasn't really about the athletic side of cycling. Then as the years went on, I started getting more into the physical aspect and racing and things like that. I started racing the Tour Divide a bunch, and I kind of started focusing more on the the physical aspect of riding. And then I'm training. I mean, training. I do it with quotes because my training is just I just go on adventurous rides around here. But I think that I was just felt like I was starting to lose touch with what brought me into cycling to begin with, which was this adventure, do it just for the traveling aspect. Who cares about how far or how fast you're going or that kind of thing, which I'm all about that. But I was just losing sight of it because I was getting so focused on, Tour Divide, go faster, blah, blah, blah. So then the Baja Divide, I set an intention beforehand. I was like, I just want to go on this trip solo and not focus at all about how fast I'm going or how long my distances are daily, any of that kind of stuff. And I just want to go back to being a student of the area that I'm traveling through and just ride in whatever manner feels right. If I feel like doing a 10-mile day or taking a rest day, then that's great. And if I feel like doing a 200-mile day, then that's great. It's just whatever I'm feeling. And the Baja Divide, oh my God, it was so good for it. I mean, that route, that is a masterpiece of a route. It's crazy because it's an established route, just like, the Great Divide mountain bike route or any of these other routes. It's established in the sense that there's a line, that you follow, but it feels like you are just in the wilderness. I mean, it is a really wild experience. And there's no way you could do the Baja Divide without it being like an absolutely legendary adventure because it's just adventurous by nature.
Yeah. Yeah, for people who haven't done it before, myself included, like what? Like the wilderness, the
Mm-hmm.
remoteness between towns, the towns you're coming to are super tiny. Like what, break down that route a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. So you start off you kind of enter Mexico in the mountains. Like the highest point of the whole route is for me was on day one. So you're kind of up high elevation, just yeah, really remote, and then you kind of drop down and you get into these insanely remote coastal sections that, for me here living in California, particularly, central and southern California, the coastline is just developed. Like there really isn't a lot of raw, untouched coastline at this point.
Yeah.
And then you get down there into Baja, and especially on the Baja Divide route, all of a sudden you're going along these stretches of 70, 80 mile stretches of coastline where you're riding on the sand pretty much on the coast, just completely undeveloped, like wilderness style. So yeah, there's a lot of, you have to be pretty cautious about how much water you have, and food, and think about how many days you're going to do a particular section, and how much food you need to bring. I mean, all that kind of classic stuff. You need to be pretty dialed on the Baja Divide because there isn't a whole lot of help out there. If you were to need help with food or water, you kind of need to nail it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I just, the Baja Divide, you go through all these different landscapes. I mean, a lot of people will think, oh, Baja, it's just the desert, but man, you're up super high elevation, you're down low, you're by the coast. There's rivers and lakes and there's a lot of really epic desert and cactus land and stuff like that. And then you just sprinkle in the magic of, how warm and welcoming the people of Mexico are, and the food. Oh my God. I mean, what's more epic than having like a super long, challenging day in the desert, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a small coastal village and you're eating fish tacos that, like it's the best.
Nothing is
It's
better
the
than
best.
that. Yeah.
It's the
Yeah.
greatest.
That is
Yeah.
absolutely the pinnacle.
Yeah.
It's on that. Like I said, I've been following you for a while and I've enjoyed following your journey just on social media, but there was something about that Baja Divide that really captured my personal interest. And that's when I was like, oh, I want to get this guy on the podcast. And I think what it was is like, you had an infectious excitement and energy, and you just seemed always like super happy on the Baja Divide. And I think like in general, that's kind of your MO to bike travel. Is that just all Instagram, or are you really having that good of a time?
Oh, I was having that good of a time for sure. I've definitely also have moments that aren't like that, and maybe I'm just not sharing them as much, and maybe I should be. I mean, the thing about especially a solo trip on a place like the Baja Divide. On the Baja Divide, you're not really getting distracted by other people. You're just alone, right? So I would
Hey,
be riding for 10 to 12 hours, just in my own thoughts. And me- certainly I go to dark places in my head, and try and work through things, but it doesn't always work out. Like sometimes I just do get sad and negative. But then I don't know really what it is, but there's always just something that will kind of snap me out of it. And I think that it's the comparison of like maybe some lower thoughts, some negative thoughts, that all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is amazing. Like I've been hungry for 4 hours and I just found a date palm tree in the middle of the desert, and now I'm eating dates, like plentiful dates. And it's just like such an extremely positive experience. And I think that those are the moments that I tend to focus on. And also those are the moments that are easier to share. I'd say that I am generally a pretty happy and stoked person. But it's not like I don't, I'm real as well, and definitely deal with challenges just like
yeah.
everybody.
I think we all struggle to put our hardships on the internet, and I think that could be for a variety of reasons, but like for me, like internally, it's like, I chose to be here and nobody wants to hear me complain about it. You know what I'm saying? It's like
Exactly.
nobody made me
Exactly.
go and do this. So like, I don't want to share
You're
that.
there by
Oh,
choice.
yeah,
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 totally. And I think, yeah, I mean, and I'll share, if I'm having a bike problem, I'll share that. That's easy to share if it's a bike problem or this and that. But it's like, oh, do I really want to just put out there on my social media, like, oh, yeah, hey, I'm like dealing with a really challenging relationship thing or whatever it may be, that's like actually making you sad, that's not really related to bikes at all. It's like that's my journal. That's not my Instagram,
Yeah.
you know.
I'm always really interested because like I have derived a lot of benefit personally through podcasts in general, not necessarily mine also, but like just other people's podcasts. And one thing I like about it as a medium is you peel back the curtain and you
Mm,
understand that like everybody has hardships and everybody's like trying to manage work-life balance and figure out like,
hmm
I mean, you alluded to some of your struggles with, that journey for yourself personally. And like, I think like anytime you peel back the curtain, you're going to find that we're all just humans. We all have highs,
hmm
we all have lows, and we're all just trying to figure it out. And like, that's always made me feel better about being me. So like, I really get a lot of value out of like
mm,
understanding, where people are coming from and whatever context, these trips happen in for them. But even though I have that understanding and I've derived a lot of benefit from it, I still personally really struggle with being vulnerable enough to like share my own woes or whatever. It's like,
hmm
nobody wants to listen to me, talk
hmm
about I had a bad day or whatever. And it's weird. I don't
uh-huh.
know. But I think we all
Yeah.
have that, I don't think that's a unique
Yes.
human experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. We all have those moments, and it is just harder to share. It's like it's like, yeah, it's harder to share that sort of thing with the masses for some reason,
Yeah.
it feels like it.
Um, well, there were a few stories that I wanted to get some closure for myself on the Baja Divide. I've been saving these questions for like 5 months. They're not that good, but like
Oh, cool.
one of the ones that I'm wanting you to talk about is this was the trip I believe where like some random dog in the middle of the desert came and joined your
Oh my
ride
God.
for a period of
Yeah.
time and you were having to like ration water and like
Yeah.
what happened there? Like I'm only getting like the social media glance
Oh,
into your
yeah.
experience, but it was so I don't know. I mean, like as a dog lover, right? You're just like, oh my gosh, I got a ride buddy,
Oh,
but then also like, what do you do with the dog? And
oh
yeah,
my God, dude, I think about that dog all the time. I really do. And actually, I always now recently going into some events, I try and embody the spirit of that dog with my riding because that dog was like, people talk about spirit animal, this and that. Like that dog had this energy that I strive to have in my life. But yeah, pretty much that one was, I was, oh, I forget the name of the exact town I was in, but I was in a town and I was loading up for what is described as the longest stretch of the Baja Divide without food or water. I think it's about 140 or 150 miles or something like that. And you go along this really epic stretch of coastline called the Seven Sisters coastline, and it's just amazing. And going into that, I was like, okay, either I can really load up my bike with all sorts of food and water for 2 or 3 days, or I mean, I at this point I know that I have it within me to like ride 150 miles in one push. So I was like, or I can just kind of load up normal and start really early and go for like an epic day, So that's what I did was I loaded up pretty much for one day with a little bit of extra in case it ended up taking me 2 days because on the Baja Divide, I mean, just like a lot of these routes, but especially the Baja Divide, you can't base how long something is going to take on the distance or the
yeah,
elevation because there's so many factors at play. Um, anyways, I started riding and yeah, water was the big one where I was like, okay, I need to be really smart about my water. Anyways, right when I left this town and I'm like pretty deep into this desert, probably 20 miles in or 30 miles into this desert section, out of nowhere, the most amazing dog just showed up next to me. And it's hard to explain that connection, but it was like I felt it in my heart. I was like, oh my God, this dog is the dog. Like this dog, I was like riding my lines, and then the dog was taking these epic lines, weaving through the cactuses, like super playfully,
yeah.
really athletic dog, really happy, um, and just adorable, obviously. And I was like, oh my God. And then I was kind of loving it for a while, but then a couple miles in, I'm like, okay, what's the deal with this dog? Like, does this dog have an owner? Where does this dog live? Why is it still with me? When is it going to go back? I started thinking about the logistics. But at the same time, I was kind of on a mission. I was like, I need to keep moving so I can, get to my destination tonight. So I kept riding and riding and riding. And then I ended up having an hour at least or more riding with this dog. And to the point where I was like, okay, I need to deal with this now because this dog, is it just expecting that I'm its caretaker now? I didn't really know what to do. And then I definitely had the thought, I was like, is this my dog now?
Yeah.
It's like, I love this dog. It doesn't have
Sure.
any signs of having an owner or anything like that, other than the fact that the dog looked healthy. So it made me think that it was like cared for, it didn't have major skin problems. It wasn't like emaciated or anything like that. And so I was considering that for a while. I was like, do I want a dog now? Like, am I in a time of my life where I can own a dog? And the truth is, no, I totally can't have a dog right now, just based on my lifestyle and other things. But it was extremely hot. I ran into a pretty unfortunate bike issue that had me stopped for actually a couple of hours. And this dog is just still with me in the heat of the day, no shade. And I was like, I felt obliged. I was like, okay, I obviously need to take care of this dog right now because I'm thirsty. The dog must be thirsty. So I started sharing my water with it and giving it some of my fruit and stuff like that. And I was just really torn as far as what to do. I kind of reluctantly kept shooing the dog a little bit. I would kind of be like, hey, buddy, like, come on, go back, go home, go home, go home. Even though I loved the dog, it was hard for me to do that. Eventually, while I was still there working on my bike, the dog just kind of started trotting off back to where we came from. And we were like 2 hours in at this point from where I met the dog, maybe a little bit more. But just the way that dog was, it was clearly like a super athletic dog. It clearly knew the desert. It just had a resupply via my water and fruit and stuff. I felt pretty confident that dog is okay. I
Yeah.
think that the dog made it home okay. Although there's no knowing for sure, right? And that's definitely a tough thing to think about. Is like, man, I don't know. Like, I don't know what the right call was there, but
Yeah. They,
dude, I love that
I've
dog.
I've been in a similar situation, and so I can really identify with a lot of the stuff you said. My girlfriend lives 100 miles away from me, almost on the nose, and so like not a little while ago, I was like, I'm gonna ride to your house, and like we'll hang out, and then I'm gonna ride home. And so I left her house at like 9:30 at night, and I was gonna ride through the night, and somewhere around like
No
2
way,
a.m.
epic.
this dog just it's like a German Shepherd mix or something. Like at first I was like scared of it, and I don't really get scared of dogs, but he was like just looking at me real intently. I was like, all right, buddy, like what are we doing here? And he just wanted to play. He was like a puppy, and he ended up like joining my ride for like 10, 20 miles. I don't even know. Like he was keeping my
No
pace,
way.
and I was talking to him. I got videos, and I mean, me and that dog have a relationship. I named him. His name is Mike. I named him
Oh,
after Mike Hall. I'm like, dude, you are
oh
made for
no
this, And so like,
way.
and I'm
Legend.
having the same conversation. I'm like, are you my dog now? Like, are you coming all the way home with me? And like while you're having that conversation with yourself, you're like, or do you belong to somebody? Am I taking you away from, your home? And how are you going to get back? And that dog eventually, like, for whatever reason, we were like, I don't remember exactly. It was a long time. I want to say like close to 20 miles. Eventually, he just like turned around and went home.
Mm,
And I guess they
yeah,
have like a sense for, what their range is and what they feel
I think
comfortable with,
so. I think so. I think that dogs are so smart, and you might think like, oh, this dog is, just following me and chasing me and not really thinking about anything else. But I think that they're pretty aware of, where they're coming from and how, what they need to make it back to where they're coming from. So just like in your situation and mine, I think that the dogs just eventually were like, okay, it's time for me to go home now, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and they're good at that, they're dogs.
I think both of our dogs are fine. I think both of them
Yeah,
are
they're
fine.
good.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
dude, Mike sounds like a legend.
He was a
I
legend. I'll send
love
you a
it.
video, man. He was awesome.
Oh, cool.
I don't think I ever shared that on social media. I'm not very good at sharing on social media. I envy people like you who like are much better at taking people along for the ride. Like I record a bunch of stuff and then like I never share it and I don't know why. I don't know. But
Huh,
anyway,
interesting.
um, yeah. All right, where do I want to go? I have so many notes, and I want to. So I have a whole section on Colombia, but we're gonna make it brief because I really want to get to the Tour Divide. But I'm really curious.
Totally.
So right after Baja Divide, did you go immediately to Colombia?
Dude, what a logistic. So I had set because I had my fat bike on the Baja Divide, and I wanted to take my Flanimal to Colombia. So my family lives in LA. So I finished the Baja Divide, immediately got on a bus from La Paz to the border to Tijuana. That's a rough bus ride. That was like a 27-hour nonstop. Like couldn't even leave the bus. I mean,
On like a chicken bus?
A chicken bus? What's that?
That's what they call them. So I
Is
mean,
it?
not like, was it a Greyhound or was it like a chicken? So they call them chicken buses, where like it's just all the locals and you're crammed in there and there's no
Okay.
ventilation and
It was somewhere in between the two. Like,
okay.
because Greyhound, I feel like, there's like air conditioning and stuff like that. This one was definitely no air conditioning, but it was a bus, there was like, what it just wasn't very comfortable.
Yeah.
But anyways, it was cool. I was quite tired at that point, so I slept through most of it. Got to Tijuana, made my way to Los Angeles, and then the next day, I had already boxed up the Flanimal before going to Baja. I had boxed it up and set aside the gear I wanted to take on that trip. And I'm not the kind of person that's like very organized, especially like planning things ahead. So it took a lot for me to think, okay, I'm planning this Baja Divide trip, and now I also need to think about this Colombia trip, and blah 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 blah. But I somehow did that. So I finished the Baja Divide, took that bus back, and then the next day got on a flight with my Flanimal to Colombia. So
Wow.
it was a quick turnaround.
Yeah. And just real quick, I mean, take me through that trip. Cause like what I think you did is you went to Colombia, toured around Colombia quite a bit. Then you race the Transcordelia deer.
You're gonna
Fuck.
get it, dude. You're gonna get it.
Transcordelia.
Transcordilleras.
Diatas.
Yeah,
Transcordaria. Fuck. I am bad. I have a hard time
it's a tough
speaking
one.
English, and
That's
that's true. It's true. Like I have like this weird like speech impediment where like anyway, it's a whole nother. I have problems, but I have dyslexia, and I think that like all the letters get scrambled around in my brain, and like it
okay,
makes pronunciation hard because everything's like just bouncing around. But
for sure, for
anyway,
sure.
but then you raced this race that I can't pronounce, and then did you tour the race route as well?
Yeah. So I got to Colombia, and then pretty much immediately started that race. Actually, the race was like the
Okay.
first thing. It was really cool because it's a bike packing race, but it's like it was organized, and like it was the first race I've ever paid for. So it was like a paid event that, so you get a t-shirt, and there wasn't really support vehicles, but I think that there was some insurance that I don't know, like it was an organized race. It's not just like
Uh-huh.
signing up for Trackleaders for the Tour Divide or whatever. It was like this is a production. There was like media cars and that sort of thing. So that was really cool. And I tried really hard on the race because that's that was my mission. So I was riding through the nights and stuff like that. And then I was realizing, everything I was seeing during the day was just absolutely gorgeous and so cool. And I was kind of bummed to be missing the sections I was riding through in the night because I could tell that they were also beautiful, but I didn't really get to see it. So I finished the race and then toured the same route back to the start pretty much, which was really cool because in that way I got to see all the places that I, missed
Yeah.
during the night. Um, and I was so grateful for that experience because that route, I mean, it was like, gosh, what was it, like a 650-mile route or 700-mile route, and really mountainous, a lot of climbing, rugged roads. I mean, all those amazing things. And I got to do it twice, which was
Yeah.
really, really cool.
I think
Yeah.
you're the first person I've heard. I'm sure someone's done that before, but I can't think of anybody else that I know of. And it's I think something that I talk about and other people talk about is like one of the downsides of racing is that one, you're just moving fast through the terrain during the day. So maybe your human connections are a little more brief, but then at
Hmm.
night you're missing huge swaths of land. And if you're in like a new
Totally.
place, you don't want to miss that. So I think
Exactly.
you found the solution. You just race it and then you go back and you're like, what did I
Just do
miss?
it again. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I love that, man.
Yeah, yeah, that was really cool. Yeah, that is the tough thing about racing, like bike pack racing, because yeah, you're going through these beautiful places, but if you're riding at night, I mean, night riding is amazing and wonderful for so many reasons. But you're just not seeing that area, you know. So that's why, like with the Tour Divide, for instance, you know, I've done my first time doing it, I toured the whole route, so I got to see everything. So now when I race it and I'm going through the night, even though I'm not necessarily seeing the places I'm night riding through, I know what it looks like.
Right. Yeah. You don't feel, you
Yeah,
don't have that FOMO. Yeah.
right. But in Colombia, so I toured that route back to the start, and then I added on some other routes that I was mostly getting from bikepacking.com because, oh my God, what a resource that is. They are so cool.
Yeah.
That website and everyone who contributes to that website, oh my God, like, thank you. They do a really good thing for the bikepacking community. And so I was just there and I was like, oh yeah, let me check out some routes. And I happened to be in a town that was along one route called the Oboyaka route. And oh my gosh, that route was so cool. So I did that and a couple other things. So yeah, so the Columbia was a race that turned into a tour.
Yeah.
And it was so good. Yeah. It's my
That's
hope
it.
is to go back there. Yeah.
All right. So hard question, maybe it's easy. Out of all the places in all the countries in Latin America, what's been your favorite so far? I'm asking for personal research here.
Mm-hmm. Dude, it's Colombia.
Oh wow.
It
Okay.
it is. Yeah. Well, especially in terms of like bicycle travel,
Sure. Yeah.
because in Colombia, you like all of these towns are just connected. You can connect them through pavement if you want, but there's ways to connect all of these mountainous towns on super epic dirt roads. And I think that was really cool. I was blown away. I was like, I can't believe that I haven't been on pavement in the last, week or so, just because you can connect everything on dirt. And the riding is really challenging, which I love. And the food is so good, and there's so much fruit, and the scenery is constantly changing. I mean, in Colombia, you can really easily go from, being at 1,000 feet elevation or something like that, and then do like a 7,000 foot climb. And next thing you know, you're like up and you're seeing snow and glacial peaks and stuff like that. And then you drop down and you're like in the hot, humid jungle environment. I mean, it's just like, it's so diverse.
Yeah.
And also, Colombia as a country loves cycling. Like, cycling is one of their main sports along with soccer.
Viva la
So
Colombia.
yeah, exactly. So it's like, as you're riding around, your interactions with people are generally amazing because people are so excited to see you. They're really interested, and they, not to generalize, but they love bikes over there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really good country for bike travel. Yeah.
One of the questions I was kind of skipping over, but I'm just going to ask it
Oh yeah, let's go.
for time reasons, not because of any other reason. But how much do you love fruit? This is one of the things that like I've noticed about you is you seem to have like a high affinity for fruit. You've mentioned it several times on the podcast. Like, how much do you love fruit? What does fruit mean to you in your life?
Oh my gosh, that is so funny. Dude, I absolutely love fruit. And like with everything that I have, I think it's one of the great joys of life, is like these just amazing things that grow on these trees. They're generally really sweet and refreshing, and like all have their distinctive tastes. And it's also, fruit can be like a sign of where you are, especially if you're eating like local stuff. It's like, you go down to Colombia and you eat the fruit down there, and it's like South American fruit. You're eating different things, and it automatically makes me happy. Even just the smell of fruit. Like if I'm having a down day, I can just grab an orange and like scratch the skin of the orange and smell that, and like automatically I'm happier.
Dude,
And
if things don't work out for you in bike pack racing as far as like, or bike packing as a career, maybe you should be the spokesperson for fruit, because like you're nailing it, man.
Oh man,
I love it.
they're just
Fruit
like
bring
little
you,
gems.
yeah, fruit just, I mean, you hear like a lot of times people are like, oh man, that brisket was so good or whatever. Like, veggies, like, oh, I just crave fresh veggies. But like, I've just noticed from following you, you're like, you talk about the fruit. The fruit is the
Oh
thing that like
yeah.
gets you stoked.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
I love
That's
it. I
that's what
love
I'm
it.
seeking. Yep.
Give them the fruit. If
Pomegranates
you're ever gonna
especially,
give them a
my
hand up, you're gonna
favorite.
popularize fruit hand ups. All
Uh,
right. Let's touch on Race Across America. Did you? I haven't
Arizona,
listened to it.
Arizona.
What did I say?
You said a race across America, which I will
Oh my
never do.
gosh. Yeah, sorry. That's my brain. Race Across Arizona, which also
Hmm.
starts with an A.
Right.
Um, yeah. So did you? I haven't listened to it yet, but did you just record another podcast on that experience?
Yeah, I did a podcast with a super cool dude named Derek. We mostly focused on nutrition. His podcast is like it's like a mostly nutrition focused podcast.
Oh, cool.
Which was really cool because I told him beforehand, I was like, yeah, I'm happy to talk about my nutrition on that race, although I don't think it's gonna like go in line with a lot of the other content you're putting out there with like ultra runners and stuff like that. Because
Man.
as you know, like bike pack racing nutrition is like hostess products or like
Yeah.
gas station resupplies. But yeah,
Yeah.
I did. I
Okay.
chatted with him. Yeah.
Well, good. Then he probably didn't ask you this question. So you set a new FKT on the race across Arizona.
Hmm.
What was your time and like how did you feel? Not just like, oh yeah, I won, like that's awesome, but like how did you walk away from that and be like, okay, that was a good time? Or did you walk away being like, oh, there's a lot of room for improvement here? And I think you know where my next question is going to be after this.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, I think it was a combination of the two. I mean, I finished that and I was like, wow, that was freaking epic. Like I couldn't believe how cool that experience was. I mean, there was so much to it. It took me it was under 3 days. I was like 2 days and 22 hours or something like that. So 70 hours, I think, or around that was my time. Um, I I was doing that race to kind of see where I'm at right now because my big focus is the Tour Divide. So I was kind of like, okay, I've been doing a lot of riding. I feel good. This race, like based on what I've read about it, it seems like it caters to the things that I like to do, which is just like kind of like like long, fast gravel riding. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go give it my best shot, and I did that, and I was super stoked on how it went. No doubt, I was like, oh, cool. I mean, the FKT thing was awesome, but more so, I was actually really what I was happy about was the fact that I pushed myself for whatever it was, 70 hours straight, and my body felt great. Like no Achilles things, which I deal with sometimes, no knee problems. Like I felt totally fine, and that was a huge takeaway for me. Um, but I did, of course, in thinking back on the ride, I was like, oh my god, like sure I did that pretty fast, but I definitely could have shaved hours off here and there. I think what happens to me, and I don't think I'm unique in this, is like when I'm tired and I'm riding in the night, I just lose focus a little bit. So I remember there was 2 nights where I was riding and I just started like exploring campgrounds and stuff like that because I was like, oh, this place looks sick. Like I wonder like where does this go? And I'd be like go checking out a different road that I knew was off route, and then I'd be like, dude, what are you doing? Like you're like sacrificing sleep right now. Like go freaking ride.
Yeah.
So little things like that. I knew time could be improved, but I was pretty happy with how it went too, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's a sick
you might,
route.
I think you have a couple records with the specifically with the race across Arizona. One, you have an FKT record, but then you probably have the record for one of the shortest held FKTs in the history of FKTs.
Yeah, right. It was like a week later. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so funny. Yeah,
So yeah, like Dana Ernst came along, like you said, like a week later on an ITT of Race Across Arizona and beat your time, and now
totally.
he has the FKT. So like, how much did he beat you by? I don't know what the time
I
gap was
think it
there.
was around 3 hours.
Okay, so
Yeah,
not
which
much.
is sig Well, it depends how you look at it. In my opinion, 3 hours, I mean, on a route like that, that's pretty significant in the way I look at it. But I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, but if you're not like getting confused and thinking you're on a bike tour and like exploring campgrounds, the 3 hours can come back to you probably pretty quick.
Oh yeah, I mean, I he smashed it like so cool. And that's the beauty of these things, right? It's like FKT. Though it's so cool that people, that an FKT can get set, and then other people want to go out and best it and best it and best it, and then all that's happening is that the bikepacking community is like getting faster and better and more competitive and stuff like that. I mean, competitive in like a loving way is the way I like to see it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, you know what I mean? So I was like, dude, it's so cool that this guy just went out. Like, yeah, I was stoked to have the FKT, but like, I'm so stoked for Dana, to get out there and just all of a sudden go crush it. And heck yeah, I'm going to take it back.
Nice. That's gauntlet
Like
thrown. Yeah,
I'm
you
gonna
should
try
have gone
to,
out like the week after and like taken it
yeah,
right back because I was gonna ask you no hard feelings, and obviously there are none, but it is, I mean, talk
no.
about stealing somebody's thunder. It's like, hey man, I hope you enjoyed that for like a few days because it's mine now.
No, yeah, no, it's so good. I mean, I loved watching his thing. When I did my first check-in on where he was at, I think I checked after a day and I saw that he was beating my time. I was like, oh yeah, like this guy, he is ripping right now and he knows it.
Yeah.
And it was so cool reading his story with the route. And I think what's really cool is, anyone can go out there on these kinds of routes and push themselves super hard and they're going to have a different experience. Like he was dealing with all sorts of things like body problems, that he was pushing through. And man, I would just love to know, and I can try and relate, but I would love to know where his mind was at, like the morning of day 3 of that race. Like he must have been just like so determined and like focused and also probably having an awesome, amazing adventure. And, what's better
Yeah.
than that, right? Like
Yeah.
super cool.
Well, the FKT saga on Race Across Arizona continues.
Till
We'll have
next
to see.
year. I'm
Till
gonna
next year. All right. Finally. Well, maybe not finally. That's not the right word to put it, but it is time to talk about the Tour Divide, a
Oh
race that
yeah.
is a race and a route that is obviously near and dear to your heart. So just to go through the numbers for the listening audience, you first toured it in 2022. Was that due to COVID, by the way?
I
Did
toured
you
it in
just?
2020.
Oh, that's what I meant. Sorry, dyslexia is a bitch.
Yep.
So 2020,
No,
you
no problem.
toured it,
Yep, exactly. I
and
toured
is
it in
that because
2020.
of COVID?
It was because I didn't know about bike pack racing really at that point. So
Oh,
and yeah, I didn't really know anything about bike pack racing at that point. I had never heard of the Tour Divide
okay.
for sure. Yeah, I had no idea. And I had never really ridden a bike on the dirt before either. So I
All
got
right.
a Fargo. Yeah. So I got a Fargo, which was my first bike I ever got other than like my 1980s touring bike, and with the intention of going off road with it. And then the Great Divide, I'm pretty sure if you just Google search like off road bike touring, the Great Divide is going to come up because it's like it's the granddaddy.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, cool. I want to go do this. And then since it was COVID, I couldn't start in Canada, but I was like, oh, okay, I'll just start at the border. So I started up there in Eureka or at Rooseville, like at the border. Um, and yeah, I just did it as a tour. And it was so unknown to me because all of these experiences I had had were paved and, with civilization, gas stations or restaurants, towns, all the sorts of things. And then all of a sudden I'm like on the dirt. So I'm learning how to just ride a bicycle on unstable ground. And then also I'm like, oh, I actually need to think about like grizzly bears and stuff like that. I mean, it was just a
Yeah.
totally new experience for me.
Yeah.
Um,
I can imagine that being super exhilarating because at this stage you've done quite a bit of bike touring and bike travel. And
mhm,
so not that it's lost its luster, but you're like, okay, I know how to do this. This is within my
mhm,
wheelhouse. And then you go to the Tour Divide and you're just unpacking all these new types of experiences. So I can imagine that
totally.
being really exciting and just like engaging. But I'm picturing you on that route completely unaware that the Tour Divide exists as a race.
Oh yeah.
Did you learn about the race? Like, it's just my vision of
Yes.
this is like you're just in a gas station and someone's like, "Oh, are you racing?" And like, racing? And like, what are you talking about? And like, well, there's a race that happens every year.
Right. I think I did hear stuff like that, but I was just so unaware of it. I was like, oh, there's a race. Like, what do you mean there's a race? Like, I was just so uninterested in that because my whole mindset had nothing to do with going fast. I was like all about touring. Like when I was riding through Montana my first year touring the Great Divide, I was stopping every day and berry picking. You know, I was like huckleberries. They have these like I think they're called thimbleberries or something. They look like raspberries. Like I was just like I was touring, you know, looking for fruit, like just enjoying the surrounding and all that kind of stuff. And then it wasn't until and I was doing small days relatively. I think I was averaging like 60 miles a day, but for me that was huge. I was like I thought I was, and you know, everything's relative, right? Like
Yeah.
for me going out there and doing 60-mile days when I toured it, it was the most athletic thing I'd really ever done. It was super challenging. My body was destroyed. I got tendonitis, like all that kind of stuff, because for me at the time 60 miles a day was like super intense. And then as the tour went on, I was kind of doing it with a partner, and then me and him got separated. And then all of a sudden, when I was in New Mexico, I was riding alone. And it was my first time really touring fully alone. And I woke up one morning and I was just feeling good. And I was like, oh, I'm just going to like ride until I don't want to ride anymore today. And I put in like 100-mile day. And I was like, oh my God, I just rode 100 miles. Like, no freaking way. You know, took a photo of my watch that said I rode 100 miles, like sent it to all my peeps. You know, I was like, guys, like I just did a 100-mile day. And then I did it again the next day, and then again the next day. And then I was like kind of flying through New Mexico, having the time of my life. And I was like, oh my God, I never knew this, but like I love riding long distance, and like pushing myself in that way. And then I found out about the race, and then it was so perfect because I was like pushing myself on the race route, and then I learned that there was a race, and it was a no brainer. I was like, no freaking way, there's a race. Like I'm doing that obviously next year, like as soon as I can. So that kickstarted everything. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and then so then the next year, 2021, I raced the Tour Divide, and it was my first bike. It was my first organized, well, I don't know, organized, unorganized, however you want to call it, but it was my first like bike event, first bicycle event of any kind.
Yeah.
Race or whatever.
So 2020 toured it, 2021 raced it, got
Hmm.
in 18 days. Then
Hmm.
2022 you raced it in 17 days. 2023 you've completed in 16 days, and now we're at 2024. And so like you shaved a day off your time every single time.
Right.
And before we get into like the timing aspect of it, to speak to like the route itself, you're about
Mm.
to line up at the start of the Great Divide route this time, again, racing it for the 5th year in a row. What is
Hmm.
it about this route that keeps you coming back for it?
Well, I think it's that the fact that I know, even though I know the route and I've seen the route and done it a bunch of times, I know that my experience this year is going to be unlike any other year because there's so many variables on a route like this, you know, whether it's the weather or just the way that I'm feeling. It's just and also becoming more and more familiar with the route, I almost just learned to love it more and more, you know. So I'm like yearning to be back there, like on Cocoa Claims, and like yearning to be going crossing the border into Montana, and like I love that route. Something about that route, it's like it feels like my my soul is connected to it. So it's like a no-brainer for me, you know, that if I have the drive and the desire and the opportunity to go do this route again, it's like heck, of course I'm gonna go do it, you know?
Yeah.
And I feel like I need it. I mean, it's like it's such a the place where it takes my mind and my soul is just it's so powerful. And even though I've had all these amazing other experiences riding in other places and having all these other adventures, the Tour Divide, it's on a whole nother level. You know, where my mind goes during that event is I've never found that elsewhere. So
Interesting.
I'm so pumped. I mean, man, that's in like 2 weeks time. Woo.
Is it 2 weeks or 8 days?
It
Which
starts
one of
June
us is
14th.
right?
I hope I'm right. Oh my God. No, it starts June 14th
Oh, it's
this
June
year.
14th. Okay.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Weird. Oh my gosh. I have it
It's
in my
always the
calendar.
second Friday in June.
Oh, that's where I messed up. On my yeah, on my calendar I counted, yeah, Friday the 31st as the first Friday, but that's clearly wrong. This is how dyslexia fucks my life every single day,
Oh
on like
man.
small ways where I'm just like, I'm always just like a little bit off. So, okay. So today you are 15 days away from the
Yes.
start of the Tour de Bike. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that changes
Wow.
things. That changes my whole podcasting schedule. This is great. Okay, good stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, good to know. Thanks for helping me read calendars. But
Yeah.
all right. So, what are your goals for this year?
15 days.
Just one day every single time.
I mean, it's realistic, like yeah, well, a lot of people, like especially in my friend group here, which like none of my really close oh shoot, do I want to say that? Anyways, most of my really close friends here are not like of the biking kind. So everyone's like, "Oh, like are you going to win it this year? Are you going to go try and win it?" Because like to my local crowd, I'm like the bike pack racer guy, you know.
Mhm.
But my response is like it's always the same. It's like, no, I'm not setting my goal isn't to win it. My goal isn't to like place in a certain placement on the race because again, I keep going back to this, but there's just so many variables at play. I mean, it's like a nearly 3,000-mile bike race. Anything can happen to your bike, to your body, to your mind. Anybody can sign up for the race, like you don't have control of any of those things. What I like to have control of is how hard I'm pushing myself, and I think that every year I'm putting myself in a better position to push myself even further and further, and that's shown in my times improving by 24 hours every year. And so my goal is 15 days, but I'm also aware that maybe there's a couple blizzards and I get stuck in mud in the basin and like all these kinds of things that would prevent me from that. So my time goal is 15 days. My overall goal is to push myself to a degree that I've never done it before,
Yeah.
and learn and just become better from it.
So your goals are purely internal and not associated at all. I mean, like, would a top three add value to your experience, or is it just purely about your?
Yeah, of course it would. Like, who am I kidding? Like, yeah,
Okay.
finishing a top. Oh yeah, like of course I'd love to win. I just like I'm realistic. Top three. That would be amazing. And for sure, if I'm like riding and all of a sudden there's a possibility of finishing in like a top five or something, like, yeah, I'm sure it'll motivate me to push even harder. I definitely am aware of that kind of thing, but I just think that going into it, and also I think it just takes a little bit of pressure off myself. I think
Yeah.
I'm quick to like put all this pressure on myself with this sort of thing, and I think that I just like to go into it at least with the intention of being like, it's not about your placement. It's about the adventure. It's about the journey, and try to do it in 15 days because I know that's within my capabilities. And that's what I'm focusing on.
Yeah. I
But
think that's a
yeah,
wise approach because as you've indicated, over 3,000 miles, anything can happen, right? Weather and
hmm
mechanicals. And so to hang your hat on purely a first or a fifth place or whatever is tough. And I know like Sophiane is one to say, hey, I'm just trying to win it, like
oh,
that's the main
totally.
thing I'm going out for. And that works for him. But like, I think not hanging your hat on like on a placement, but on a personal progression of pushing yourself is, to your point,
hmm
it kind of takes some of the pressure off that experience and probably allows you to actually enjoy the race a little bit more.
Yeah, and to make decisions out there for yourself, because and it's definitely happened to me, which is why I know it's a possibility. It's like once you kind of start getting caught up with where other people are in the race, then you might be making decisions that aren't necessarily the right decision because you're like, no, I can't sleep because if I sleep, then such and such is gonna pass me, and then this and that. But it's like, if you need to sleep, you need to sleep, you know, and once you start riding not your own ride, you're making decisions about your ride on, you know, other people and things like that, then it kind of becomes a little bit sloppy, I think. So I think
Yeah.
just like focusing, like what I'm gonna do, I haven't done it yet, but what I'm gonna do is find at one or two people who have finished in the 15-day range and mark down their splits. You know, so like see, okay, what time did they get to Eureka? What time did they get to, you know, the Colorado border and this and that? And I'm gonna be doing my race thinking about those splits. That's my goal at least. So that way I'm kind of like pacing myself to go on the 15-day thing. Which, you know, I don't know if that's gonna work, but that's my plan.
Yeah. No, it's good to have a plan. And that actually kind of answers the next question I was going to ask you. Um, what do you think are your strengths and even your like maybe a strength and a weakness? Like where do you think that you have the greatest advantage? Is it through, you know, lack of sleep or time on the bike? Like where do you think that you can maximize your personal strengths on a race like Tour Divide?
I think that my strength is my ability to remain positive and the fact that like I'm so like I'm very passion driven. So like if I'm getting tired or something like that, like I know how to tap into my brain and get super fired up. Like even if it's like the middle of the night and I'm tired and hurting or whatever, like I I have it within me to like just kind of turn on the jets and get like super stoked on biking and focus on my happiness and positivity and stuff like that. And I
Hmm.
think that's my strength. I'm not a bike rider like I didn't grow up riding bikes. You know what I mean? So like I don't have it like I'm not like a natural like bike riding person. I think that I now ride a lot and I train a bit more. So yeah, I can ride. I'm not particularly fast. Like I know for sure, like this happens every year. Is like the first couple days, I do not keep up with the people in the front. No way, because like there's fast people out there, you know, that can like rip, and that is not me. I am not a fast bike rider, but I can endure pretty well, and I think the Tour Divide caters to me because I found that typically the longer an event is, the better I do relatively.
Hmm.
I don't know why. Sometimes it takes me like a few days to really find my groove, and then like I almost kind of feel like I typically get better and better as these things go on. It's the first couple days that are a little bit more challenging for me. So I think, yeah, my strength is positivity, and then just kind of being able to endure the initial like maybe pain or whatever. My weakness is descending. I'm so scared. Like I descend really, really slowly.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's another thing that I'm already expecting is like I'll be, you know, on the climbs, I hold my own, I do pretty well. And then like the first descent, I'm gonna get passed by like a ton of people. That's just how it goes.
Dude, you're gonna be on that full suspension bike. You're gonna be
That's the
bombing. You're gonna be
thing.
hucking down those mountains,
That's
dude.
the thing. That's kind of what I'm hoping. That's one of the reasons
Yeah.
I wanted to try this out was to like, oh, okay, well maybe I can tackle, you know, what I think is my weakness on the bike, which is descending, and like maybe I can like totally improve that.
Yeah, that's exciting. I got goosebumps actually. Like, yeah, I think that's exciting for you, man, because like, yeah, you get to
Thanks.
like answer that question, right? You're like, okay, you know, I have an improvement here, and will this bike like help me? And how does like incremental speed and confidence on downhills, which is not just about speed, but it's also like fatigue on the body and mental fatigue of being worried about crashing or whatever, you know, like it builds up over time. So like how does
Totally.
all that incrementally add up to, and you know, where does that land whenever you're at the end of the Tour Divide in Antelope Wells?
Hmm.
So that'll be really
Hmm.
interesting to go back and look and see how that all played out.
Totally.
How are you feeling, man? How are you feeling mentally? How are you feeling like physically? Like how prepared do you feel to line up in 15 days to take on the Tour Divide again?
Dude, I'm feeling good. I think that and this happens every year that right around this time, a couple weeks out, I start to have doubts. You know, I start to question, oh, am I ready? You know, and honestly, to be 100% honest, I also sometimes think about like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing it again? I mean, you asked me that and I
Yeah.
had an answer for you, but like I do think about that stuff. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why do I put so much focus and so much all this stuff? So I question a lot of it. But I know, or I at least have a really good feeling that once I get on that trail, I'm gonna have the answer to that. I know why I'm there. I know why I'm doing it, and it's it's the things I mentioned. It's the way it makes me feel and the way it challenges my mind and my body and all those kinds of things. Um, I'm feeling good. Like even though it's really easy for me to question where I'm at. I'm like, oh shoot, I didn't go for a ride yesterday, and I said I was going to, and like, oh man, like I can think about all those little things. But if I think about my last, I don't know, 5 or 6 months, like I've been riding, like a good amount, more than I ever have by far,
Yeah.
by far. Like in from January to June of this year, I've probably done like 4 times as much riding as I did from January to June of last year.
Yeah.
Like it's been just monumental. So I'm riding a lot. My body feels good. My mind is good. I'm ready. I'm excited. I know the route like the back of my hand. I could do that route without a GPS. Like I hope my
Wow.
GPS doesn't fail on me, but like I know that route, like so I'm just ready for it. I'm excited to see the familiar faces, as far as other riders that I know that are going to be there, but also like so many of those iconic establishments along the route. At this point, just having been there year after year, I just like I've made friends with a lot of these people, and I'm just stoked to give them hugs and say what's up, and just to get back out there and feel scared about bears and stuff like that. Like I love that. I love that stuff. Um, to go see what weather looks like. Like I'm kind of a weather nerd. I love looking at weather all over the place all the time. So I love getting on the Tour Divide and comparing, what did Red Meadow Pass look like last year versus this year, and how does that affect things? And man, I'm stoked. I'm so stoked for the Tour Divide this year. My gosh.
I mean, we're 2 weeks out, so we're at the point where we can start looking at extended forecast and trying to figure out how that's going to play a role in the race. What is
Mm-hmm.
the weather looking like for this year so far right now?
So they didn't have it wasn't a huge snow year, but it's been a really cold spring. So things haven't been melting. So I've got a buddy who lives in Fernie, and he was telling me that a lot of the passes out there still have a good amount of snow. And it's not looking particularly warm between now and the start, although, anything can happen still. There definitely still could be some snow melt, but I'm here, at least the start, the Canada and Montana sections have some snow on the ground, on the trail, which last year we pretty much didn't have any. But then in 2022, the year Sophie on, I mean, that that was like you could have brought skis on that one. There was
Yeah,
just snow
yeah.
everywhere. So um, honestly, if I tap into the competitive side of myself, like I kind of hope that there's snow. I kind of hope that there's a lot of snow, because I just know I can, like I'm fine in the snow, like it doesn't bother me. Like I'll just keep
Yeah,
moving.
yeah.
So however it is, I feel confident that I'll make lemonade out of the lemons. It's just like yeah, yeah. I think there's gonna be snow, and I think it's gonna be cold.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, I think we're to wrap it up mostly for time. I've got to hop on another phone call. I skipped over like major sections of my notes of questions and stuff that I have for you. I love watching your adventures. I like the types of adventures that you're going on, and I like the approach that you take to them, mingling and racing with touring and culture and fruit and the whole deal. And I'm excited to see how you do on the Tour Divide this year. It's going to be a good year. A lot of big names in the field, and it's always exciting. I mean, the Tour Divide is our Super Bowl.
Oh
So
yeah.
this is the time of the year where everybody's like, all eyes are on the Tour Divide, and especially if you're going to be participating in it. So before we close out, I wanted you to have a moment to you're going to be on a movie or a film of some sort.
Oh, yeah.
What can you tell us about this film? What do we have to look forward to with that? And when might it come out? Just the
Yeah.
generalities.
No, totally. It's super exciting. So I was approached by some really cool people at UC Santa Barbara, which is our university here in town. Um, and they're in a film class. It's like their senior film project. They got some budget from the school and they have all this fancy equipment, and they asked if they could do a documentary about my relationship with bikes. And so I was like, heck yeah, of course. So we spent the last maybe couple of months. Pretty much what it looks like is they just come out and they've been filming my training rides. They've been coming out there. We've been doing some interviews. They've interviewed a bunch of my family and friends and stuff like that. And like, it's actually looking pretty cool. Like, obviously it's really strange for me to watch myself on video, as I'm sure, I mean, you listen to your own voice a lot. I'm sure that's like,
Terrible.
it's like not the most comfortable thing. So yeah, when I watch the video and I see myself talking, I'm like, oh God, why did I say that? But like the production is cool. They're getting really beautiful shots. And my goal with all of this stuff is like, I hope that someone else who's on the fence about bike packing or just traveling, or maybe nothing to do with bikes, maybe someone is on the fence of like, oh, do I want to go on an adventure? Do I want to go camping? Whatever it may be, like hopefully someone watches that video and gets stoked to like go do something. That's my goal with it. And the production, I think, is going to be pretty sick. Like, they're doing a good job. They're definitely putting in the time and effort. They're a super cool crew, really motivated. Their goal is to like submit it to all these film festivals and stuff like that. And yeah, it would be cool. Hopefully it inspires somebody to do something fun. And it's coming out on June 14th, the start date of the Tour de
way. Oh shit. Well, that's something to look forward to. So people, obviously dot watching is going to be going down on the Tour Divide. So hopefully people listen to this podcast and get to know you a little bit better and follow along in your journey. But then you'll also be able to watch that film whenever it comes out on the Grand Depart.
Let me rephrase that. So it's being screened for the first time in a theater on June 14th. I am not sure when they're putting it like on the internet or whatever.
Right.
Maybe
well, then you just have to listen to this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, do me a personal favor, Dan, please. When you have time on the Tour Divide, keep those stories coming, man. Keep feeding my algorithm, man. I love watching you out there, and I'll definitely be rooting for you and everybody out there. But really enjoyed the energy and everything, the life, the vibrance that you bring to the community. I'm a big fan, and it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. I've really enjoyed it, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, Patrick, dude, I mean, like I said, I listened to your podcast. Actually, I think I reached out to you during the Tour Divide last year because I was riding through the night and I was listening to your podcast and like a lot of your stuff that you've done with Hal. And like I'm just a huge fan of you and what you do for the bikepacking community. It's just really special, and I really appreciate the energy you bring to it as well. It's like really positive and definitely, like, I say that my mission is to help people get out there and ride their bike, but man, you are like the king of that, and it's really cool. And yeah, so much love, man. I love what you're doing. I'm so honored to have had this chat with you. And man, I hope we get to like ride together someday or something like that. It'd be super cool.
Man, you are on my top 3 people I want to go ride bikes with. Like, and I would like a bike tour. Like, I would love to go ride bikes with you sometime. Yeah. So,
well, dude, I want to come do the showdown.
You do? Sure. Fuck yes, please.
Yeah, I really do.
Please.
Yeah,
we'll get through the Tour Divide and maybe we'll become best friends. You never know. Anything's possible.
Besties.
All right, homie. Well, enjoy it, man. It's been a pleasure. I'm going to hop on my next call, but really enjoyed it and I look forward to watching you out there, man.
Sick. Thanks, dude.
All right. Happy riding. Talk to you later.
Patrick. Later.
Peace. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And thank you, Dan, for coming on the podcast. And good luck out there on the Tour Divide. We will certainly be watching and rooting and sending you well wishes. And before we get too far down this road, I want to redeem myself for my terrible pronunciation of that race in Colombia. So I've been practicing and I want to give it a go. So the race that Dan did in Colombia is actually pronounced Trackleaders. All right, I think I got it right, or pretty close that time. So anyway, I just had to redeem myself, or at least try to. All right, everyone. Next week's episode is TBD. I've got something lined up. I think I'm waiting on confirmation, so it's a bit of a surprise, but I am working on getting that episode scheduled so we can get it recorded and out to you fine folks. As always, thank you so much for being here. It is always a pleasure. And until next week, you know what to do. Go ride your damn bike.
It was the middle of the night. You grabbed your knife and you held it tight. The sounds of beasts kept you awake. The sounds they made kept you afraid. In the morning, you packed your bike. Memories forgotten from the previous night. You rode faster than ever before. Was it your imagination or merely folklore? Fear turned into strength as you pushed further. Every pedal stroke stronger and firmer. Your bike feels weightless, your legs aren't tired. You think to yourself, just a few more miles. Bikes or death.